everyone, welcome to the Sporting Edge with me, Greg H. It's good to be with you, just to talk about some issues around the world of sport. And obviously right now, the biggest issue is COVID-19. And a big question I've got is what does sport look like post-COVID-19? And there's a lot of conjecture and there's a lot going on, and I get that. But I do believe that we need to get back to the future now. And I've just written an article called Back to the Future for Sport. We've got to get back to the future. We've got to understand and start to strategize around what sport looks like for our kids, for our youth, post-COVID-19. The one thing I am certain of is that it's not going to look like what it looked like before COVID-19, and I'll run through some quick points around why that is. I don't believe we're going to be able to revert back to the same the overly structured, time-intensive models that I think naively we've set up over many decades. I think here we've got an amazing opportunity to push the reset button and to tap into some of the things that COVID-19 has brought about to this world. Fundamentally, COVID-19 has reset the family unit. We've had to be isolated. Some countries have been isolated for months already. Some are mid their isolations and have been isolated for a couple of weeks and certainly going to be isolated going into the future. The UK is talking about quarantining until the curve is totally flattened, which could take them till the end of the year. To be isolated for that amount of time is incomprehensible for many, but it is our new reality. And what are we doing about when we come out into this new reality? What does this all mean? And I've chatted to people in Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, Israel, South Africa, America, 5 or 6 countries where this conversation is starting to happen, but I think it's going to be happening at a very specific level, or should I say across many specific levels. And I'm not too sure that it is happening yet, and perhaps I'll take a lot of I'm happy to take comments and opinions to the post, as long as they're not overly aggressive. Let's understand that everybody's trying to do their best, so constructive comments are welcome, but certainly those that are destructive will be deleted. It's become clear to me that parents and kids have found free play and outdoor activities and being together as a family. Again, it's the family unit is probably the most resurgent thing during COVID-19, and so I can't believe that we're going to make a return to sport without any proper adjustments. In looking at various topics around this article, I came across an article written in the United States by a guy by the name of John O'Sullivan, and there was a quote that was in there by, and I'm going to read the quote to you, by the executive director of Project Play, Tom Ferry, where he says, "It makes me wonder if we'll see more enthusiasm or create a scenario for more in-town recreational leagues and hold off the travel team environment instead of sorting the weak from the strong when they're 6 or 7 years old. Could we promote a more low-cost or local activity that's more inclusive, more affordable for more families, at least through grade school?" Now that for me is a quote that probably sums up my perceptions around sport pre or post COVID-19, by the way. I believe that, and then you'll see later, I'll talk about the barrier to entry, which is the cost of the game. So I've got 6 or 7 points here that I just want to quickly touch off with you around what I believe we need to be considering when having the discussion about what sport looks like post-COVID-19. The first one is, as I said, some countries have been locked down for weeks already. Some have had their lockdowns extended. So some are going to be still in lockdown, and most countries are probably going to be in some or other type of an isolation, at least till the end of July, if not till the end of August. So family dinners, just as an example, have made a resurgence. I mean, I speak from experience now where I don't think we've been able to sit at a family dinner properly pre-COVID-19 for many, many years. And certainly in isolation, it's all you can do. So family dinners and the family unit has made a resurgence, and they've valued times, that they've become times of connection where we don't get connection with our friends. We now have been able to reconnect with our family unit. So the family unit is a big one. Number 2 is that all the people that I've spoken to want their kids to go back to sport, will or do want their kids to go back to sport, but don't really want to be crazy running around like crazies, with like chickens with no heads. Really, people are looking tap into that family time and tap into what's important, and not necessarily be spending 5 nights a week out at training sessions, weekends, splitting up families, mothers and fathers taking multiple children around wherever they need to go to play sport. People don't want to be doing that. So it's not going to be ideal. So point 1 and 2 are kind of pretty similar. Point 3 is that my children particularly, and I've seen and I've spoken to other parents, that your children are feeling particularly well rested at this time. And that's a great thing. And obviously it's understandable what that's about. This has my family discussing what does sport look like for my kids, or what does the extracurricular activities look like post-COVID-19. And it's because the family and family time and the family unit has made a resurgence, that this type of conversation is coming about. So in terms of sport post-COVID-19, one of the components that have to be taken into account is this reconnection, this resurgence of the family unit. Number 4, through this isolation, there's been an increase in unstructured and informal activity, certainly with siblings, my kids and their siblings. They've been able to find stuff to do that, without them even knowing it, is developing coordination skills, whilst elevating the serotonin and oxytocin levels, which are in males and females, that are on the rise when you are bonding with loved ones, with family, with very, very close friends. And the games like French cricket have made a comeback. Small space pop-up sport is what I like to call it. A couple of penalty shootouts, or a little bit of a mini tennis game, a bit of beach bat. The Americans coined the phrase, let's play catch. Just throwing the ball and catching. These are addressing fundamental skills that I don't think get addressed properly, should I say, in our community or our sporting environments. Cheers, just have a bit of a coffee here. So the increase in sport, in unstructured, informal activity is definitely up. And my son turned around to me the other day and said, why can't we just do this more often? Why do I need to go back and play team sport and deal with some of the nasty kids? Which really drove the message home for me. And I know that my son, is not innocent in those exchanges, but that's kind of the thing that is one of the reasons. Now, the biggest one for me, my point number 5, is one of the singular barriers to entry for most sporting at the moment is that of the cost. And financially, many families are massively hit by the pandemic. We know that unemployment is on the rise massively in the world, and understandably so. So the access to disposable income around recreation, as opposed to putting food on the table or paying for school fees, is very limited. So we have to be able to drive a different value proposition, where the spending of money perhaps is not the deciding factor of value proposition. Which, I mean, if that is our sole deciding factor around a value proposition, then our sense of values is skewed at best. Where families have more than one kid playing different sport, you can have families spending up to in the thousands of local currency just to be recreational. And so you then take from there, you add there's an elite pathway for most sporting codes around the world, in the USA, in Britain, here in Australia, in South Africa, third-party providers offering all types of promises around, becoming the most amazing, the next Ronaldo or the next Roger Federer. These are all pipe dreams for most people. Most of the elite sport pathways, the transfer rate of those children into higher levels is very, very limited. So, in essence, we've got to be very clear on what an elite pathway looks like for kids. I mean, I'm not a fan of elite pathways. I don't believe high performance and children in the same sentence should ever be a discussion. I never have, and I never will. That's my opinion. But I know that there is a different school of thought for many people, and so I don't believe that elite pathways or high performance pathways for children aged between 12 and 18 will ever disappear, unfortunately. So we've got to find a way, we've got to workshop, we've got to look at how this new reality fits in to an elite pathway. Never mind how it just fits into more recreational, more community-based sport. So we're going to have to look at sport we're going to have to be like Elton John. You're going to have multiple sets of glasses with different lenses, having a look at what sport means and what social participation means and the cost of all of that, and making it realistic. The 6th point that I've made a note of here is creating more localized sport, as Tom Ferry had referenced in his quote. we need to limit travel now at the highest levels, where flights and flying to different countries is absolutely fundamental to international sport being functional. This might not be possible for a very long time, and so what does that mean? How do we function with managing transport locally at the lowest levels of the recreational game? How do we bring sports to be more local and reduce the amount of traveling, the burden? Because again, it's a financial thing. You don't necessarily have that much money to keep putting petrol in your car and driving, a 60 to 100 kilometer turnaround to go and play a bit of recreational sport on a Sunday morning. So we have to be very clever around what transport looks like. Then finally, point number 7, we're going to, as all stakeholders in the game, not just governing authorities or politicians, we have to understand what game days and what training processes look like post-COVID-19. Social distancing, I think, is going to be here to stay for a long time. Sanitization is going to be fundamental to our daily lives post-COVID-19. And so how do we structure what our game day processes look like? How do we communicate that to the communities to allow them to feel safe to come back to playing sport at club level? We have to take this into account, and we have to make sure that we've crossed off all the T's and dotted all the I's. And I think all stakeholders, all the way up to politician level, are going to have to make sure that sanitization is right up there, having a look at what coaching means post-COVID-19. No shaking of hands. I imagine shaking of hands is going to be something that is one of the last things ever to return. Social distancing, if spectators are allowed, the canteens and how those canteens are operated, change rooms. I don't think change rooms can be used for a very long time. I think one has to make sure that the use of indoor closed areas is like Disneyland to contagions of this nature. So change rooms for me are going to be a thing of the past for the foreseeable future, and I think we have to be assisting our clubs and our entities on what Back to the Future for Sport really means. So again, if you want to shout out whilst you're listening to this article, just drop me a message in the boxes below. Feel free to drop me messages at any given time on social media, as long as they're constructive. So in closing, really, Back to the Future for Sport means really understanding our realities as they stand right now. I think we are not prepared enough to go back. I think we're as prepared for returning to the future as we were for the advent of COVID-19. And that tells us a lot. Now, that's my opinion. Not a medical expert, and I'm certainly no expert on social dynamics and what social aspects of this means. But getting back to the future means understanding what post-COVID-19 looks like for all levels of sport, across all codes, across all countries. So that's our show for today, and we're going to be doing this once a week. I'll be coming back with a range of topics dealing with all facets of sports administration, sports leadership. Again, just from my opinion, the sporting edge, provoking some thoughts, and if it makes a difference to you, great. If it can help you, great. And again, please feel free to share all your thoughts. Again, as long as they are constructive, I will certainly can give you some shout outs. I didn't want to do this live just because at this stage I think giving people the opportunity to take content in their stride is very, very important. And so I didn't necessarily want to burden everybody with this whole idea. I think it's very important that everybody gets to experience their sport for themselves and their content for themselves. So just a big shout out to everybody. I really hope that that it all goes well, and that your return to sport is a good one, and that effectively we all play the roles that we can play. So stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next week.